My name is Yusuf Rahman. I am 29 years old and grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, a city with one of the largest Muslim communities in the United States. For as long as I can remember, my life has been built on the pillars of discipline, faith, honoring my family, and silence. My father came from Yemen when he was young. He worked in construction, scraping together every penny to bring my mother and later raise me and my siblings with everything he believed was right. At home, religion was the center of everything. The first word I learned to say was not mama or papa, it was Allah. At the age of 5, I was already reciting verses from the Quran by heart in Arabic, even though I didn't understand what they meant. At every prayer, at every fast, I didn't question, I just did, because questioning was dangerous. Questioning was a lack of faith. I remember the first time I asked, in a low voice, if God could love someone who thought differently. My father gave me a look that froze me in my tracks. He didn't yell, he just said, "Yusuf, that's just American stuff that's lost its soul." The conversation ended there, and with it, for many years, my courage to ask anything at all ended. But inside me, a doubt grew, a small voice that whispered when everyone was asleep, "Is that all? Is it wrong to think differently?" I learned to silence that voice, to bury it with prayers, obligations, and guilt. But it always came back. On birthdays when I couldn't sing happy birthday, in classes at school when classmates talked about freedom, in movies where people cried when they felt something I had never experienced before. Peace, a peace that didn't come from fear, it came from love. That was my childhood, a world where everything made sense, except how I felt. And for many years, I lived like that, obeying, smiling in public, suffocating in silence. If you've ever felt trapped between what you were taught to be and who you really are, you'll understand every word of my story. And if this beginning touched you in any way, help me take this story further. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. This isn't just a button, it's your way of saying, "Yusuf, I'm listening." During my adolescence, what had been silence turned into an internal war. I was already 15 years old, and on the outside, I seemed like an exemplary young Muslim. I went to the mosque 5 times a day, fasted during the holy months, and avoided any contact with the too Western world. But inside, something was starting to break. At school, I began to discover other worlds. I had teachers who introduced me to philosophy, friends who talked about choices and purpose. One day, a classmate named Emily asked me, quite naturally, "Do you really believe in all this, or are you just following it because you were born into it?" I froze. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because she had touched on the question I had avoided the most. I walked home that day carrying an invisible weight. I looked at my prayer mat, and for the first time I didn't want to kneel. It wasn't anger, it was confusion. Something inside me told me that God was real, but was the God I knew the same as the God my heart was searching for? I started doing something dangerous, thinking for myself. I researched in secret. I read Christian texts in secret. I explored interfaith forums. It wasn't rebellion, it was thirst. A thirst that no automatic response could quench. And every time I tried to express that thirst, I was silenced. One night, my uncle, a tough but respected man in the community, caught me reading a book called The Gospel of John, which I had borrowed from the school library. He snatched the book from my hand and said to me, "Yusuf, do you want to dishonor your family? This is treason." That night I cried in my room, not because I was afraid of punishment, but because I felt alone with my questions, alone with my heart torn between 2 truths, the one I had been taught and the one I was beginning to feel. It was then that a silent promise was born within me. If God is real, he will show me who he is, even if it costs everything. And I had no idea how much that promise would cost. When I entered the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, it felt like the world had opened up before me. It was the first time I had lived away from home, freedom, silence, space, but also a strange emptiness that I didn't know how to fill. For the first few months, I followed the rules of my upbringing. Daily prayers, no parties, no involvement with people outside the faith. But Ann Arbor was alive and well. Ideas flowed in the hallways, in the living rooms, in the coffee shops. And it was in one of those coffee shops between one sociology assignment and another that I met Brian. Brian was a Christian, not the kind who tries to convert you in the first conversation, but the kind who carries a peace that is uncomfortable, because it didn't come from rules. It came from within. One day, after weeks of friendship, He said to me, "Yusuf, you are a guy who thinks a lot, but have you ever thought about letting God answer you directly?" That got me. How could God answer me? I had always heard that questioning was a weakness, that thinking too much was a sign of isolation, but here he was, suggesting the opposite, and I began to live a double life. During the day, the exemplary Muslim student participated in Islamic community meetings on campus, avoided forbidden foods, and smiled respectfully. At night, the hidden reader of biblical passages, the curious listener of Christian podcasts, the young person who watched conversion videos as if looking for clues about his own future. My heart was in conflict. One moment, I felt guilty for doubting. The next, I felt alive for finally seeking answers. And then came the night that changed everything. Brian invited me to a group gathering at his house. Music, laughter, food, and then prayers. But nothing like I had ever known. No one knelt on a rug. No one spoke in a language I didn't understand. These were ordinary people talking to God as one would talk to a loving father. And for the first time, I felt something no mosque had ever given me. Guilt-free freedom. I didn't convert that night, but a flame was lit. One that would not go out, not even in the face of death. And that's exactly what comes next. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary that day. It was a spring Friday, the end of the semester, and the campus was buzzing with relieved students, beers being snuck in and laughter streaming across the sidewalks, which were wet from the light rain that had been falling since early morning. I had just left the library exhausted. My body was asking for rest, but my mind, it was just asking for peace. That day, I was more confused than ever. I had secretly read the chapter in John where Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." It hit me like a punch in the chest. I couldn't stop repeating that phrase in my head, as if something or someone wanted me to really hear it. I borrowed a car from a friend and drove along I-94, on that endless straight line that cuts through Michigan like a thread between worlds. The rain was getting heavier, and the fog was creating ghosts on the asphalt. I was tired, but I didn't want to go back to my dorm. I turned on the radio. Random. It stopped at a Christian station. A song started playing, and then I heard the lyrics, "Even when I don't see it, you're working." I closed my eyes for a second, just a second. That was all it took. When I opened it again, the image of the truck coming in the opposite direction was the last thing my eyes saw. The impact was like the world had been ripped apart, a deafening noise, glass shattering, metal crumpling like paper. My body slammed into the steering wheel, and then absolute silence. There was no more sound. There was no more pain. I was there, but I wasn't. I saw my own body trapped in the wreckage, the paramedics screaming, people running, a woman crying on the phone, and I, floating, as if I was watching it all from the outside. I felt no fear, no pain, just confusion. Did I die? I tried to touch my body. Nothing. I tried to scream. Nothing. It was like I was made of mist, and then I started to feel something. It wasn't physical. It was something crushing inside, a feeling of absence, of distance, that I was going far away, far, far away. Everything started to get dark, not like when we close our eyes. It was a living darkness that breathed, that enveloped me like a prison, and in it I heard voices, whispers, accusations. "Traitor, you have rejected your faith. You played with the truth." I tried to scream. I called for help, but all that came out was a muffled, desperate sound. It was at that moment that for the first time in my life, I said a prayer that didn't follow any rules. No position, no direction, no language, just one shout, "God, if you are real, get me out of here." And then something happened. In the midst of the darkness, a light appeared, weak at first, but coming towards me, warm, serene, intense. The darkness receded, the voices fell silent, and I began to cry. Because for some reason I didn't understand, I knew exactly who was coming in that light. It was him. And in the next chapter, I'll tell you what I saw, and why, when I came back, my first word was Jesus. That light was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. It was as if it saw me completely. Every thought, every pain, every doubt. It came toward me as if time stood still around it. And the closer it got, the more I felt something I had never felt before. Peace without fear. There was no judgment. There was no rush, just a presence that made my soul stop screaming. And then, in the midst of that light, a figure appeared. He didn't have a face exactly like the pictures I saw in books, but at the same time, I knew. Somehow, I knew it was him, Jesus. He didn't speak with words, but I heard it, inside me. Yusuf, I have never been far from you. I fell to my knees. Or rather, I felt my entire being prostrate itself before him, and in that moment, all the pain I had carried for years left me. The shame of having doubts, the guilt of feeling curious, the fear of disappointing my family, everything disappeared, like dust before the wind. Jesus did not accuse me. He did not ask me why I doubted. He just loved me. And in that love I saw scenes from my life, memories of being a child, hiding in my room in fear. Moments when I felt like no one was listening to me. Each one of them, he was there, silent, waiting. Then something even more profound happened. I saw faces of people who were praying for me, people I didn't even know, but who somehow interceded so that I would have this chance. And in that moment I understood. I wasn't dead. There was still a choice. Jesus looked at me, or rather inside me, and asked me the question that no one had ever asked me with such tenderness. Yusuf, do you want to go back? I cried. A lot. And I answered, yes, but if I return, let it be to live for you. The light began to recede. The darkness did not return, but the cold of the world did. And then I woke up in a hospital with wires all over my body, screams, machines, doctors. And my first word between hiccups and tubes was, Jesus. They thought I was delusional, but I knew the truth, and the truth had set me free. Now I want to know about you. Have you ever experienced something that no one would believe, but that left a lasting mark on your soul? Tell us in the comments. Your story may touch someone more than you can imagine. Waking up after all that was like being born again, only in a stranger's body. I was in the IKEAST, Joseph Mercy Hospital in Ann Arbor. Tubes stuck in me, machines beeping, lights cutting my eyes. Everything seemed confusing, but there was one certainty in the midst of the chaos. I was back, and Jesus was real. My throat was dry. I could barely speak, but when the doctor came over and asked my name, my voice cracked and the only words that came out were, Jesus. He looked at the nurse in confusion. Perhaps he thought it was delirium, but inside me, there was a conviction that no medicine could create. I cried, for the pain, for the gratitude, for the peace that still vibrated within me, even with my bones broken and my body stitched together by surgeries. 2 days later, my family arrived. My mother came in first. Her face was covered by her hijab, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she ran to the bed and hugged me, sobbing. My father entered silently. He stood by the door, arms crossed, a hard look, suspicious. Alhamdulillah, you are alive, Yusuf, he said, almost without emotion. I knew I had to say it. I had to tell it. But how do you tell a devoted father that you found the truth outside the walls he built his entire life? I waited until we were alone. I looked at him, and with the little strength I had, I said, Father, I saw Jesus. He didn't answer. He didn't even blink. He just stood up and left the room. My mother stayed. She cried. She asked me quietly, don't say that, not even as a joke. But I wasn't joking or lying. The truth I lived could not be erased by fear. It was bigger than tradition, bigger than culture. It was alive. In the following days, my family stopped talking to me. They would come, but they would remain silent. They would look at me from a distance. The news spread throughout the community. Some childhood friends stopped responding to me. It was as if I had died, in a different way. And yet, there was peace, because for the first time, I knew who I was. No longer an obedient son seeking approval. Now I was someone loved by God, even when it cost me everything. The body was fragile, but the spirit, strong as ever, because no matter what the world said, I had seen the light, and she gave me a mission. Being discharged from the hospital should be a moment of joy, but for me it was like leaving the womb and falling into a world that no longer recognized me. My body still ached. Every step was careful, but nothing hurt more than the silence around me. My parents picked me up, but the car felt like a tomb. No questions, no conversation, just the sound of the engine and my father's eyes fixed on the road. as if looking at me was too much. When I got home, he didn't help me get down. He just opened the door, pointed inside, and said, "Your bed is in the basement. That's where you'll stay until you decide what you're going to do with your life." I went down alone. The basement was cold, damp, and musty, but there for the first time I knelt down freely. No carpet, no exact direction, no rehearsed words, just a broken heart, and grateful. "Jesus, I don't understand everything yet, but I know it was you. And if you brought me back, then show me what to do now." In the days that followed, I was cut off from everything. My father forbade me from going out. My mother left food on the stairs. My cell phone was confiscated. The internet was blocked. It was as if I had come back to life, to be buried alive. But something happened. One afternoon I heard footsteps in the basement. It was my younger sister, Layla. She came down slowly, handed me an envelope, and whispered, "Brian sent this." I didn't tell anyone. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Yusuf, I won't stop praying for you. God has bigger plans than you can imagine. Don't let fear silence you. When you're ready, I'll be waiting for you at Grace Chapel, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You're not alone." Grace Chapel. I had heard of it, a small church on the outskirts of Ann Arbor, a community that welcomed immigrants, students, and the broke. The following week, I waited for my parents to fall asleep, and with silent steps, I escaped through the basement window. I took a bus to the city. My body trembled with fear, with pain, but mostly with hope. I arrived at the church just before the service started. The lights were low, the people were simple, and the smiles were genuine. When I walked in, Brian saw me, his eyes filled with tears. He hugged me like someone who had already accepted losing someone. That night, I sang for the first time. I didn't know the lyrics, but I knew it belonged to that melody, and when they closed their eyes to pray, I did something unthinkable 2 months earlier. I raised my hands. There, in that little temple, in the midst of strangers, I was, finally, free. It was on my 4th visit to Grace Chapel that something I never would have imagined happened. The evening was drawing to a close, the lights softly dimmed, the music fading into the air. Brian introduced me to a few people in the community, and everyone was kind and warm. But there was one lady in the back of the room who looked at me differently. It wasn't judgment. It was somewhere between surprise and longing. She approached slowly, with short steps and teary eyes. When she stopped in front of me, she said, "Are you Yusuf, son of Nadra?" I nodded, a little suspicious. She smiled with a tenderness that dismantled my soul. "I'm Ruth, a friend of your grandmother, Miriam." My heart stopped for a second. Miriam. The name my family almost never said. My maternal grandmother, who died when I was only 7 years old. The only person who, even within our tradition, had a different way of talking about God. A sparkle in her eyes, a softness in her voice. I remembered her telling me Bible stories in secret before bed and saying softly, "Jesus loves you, but one day you will discover that for yourself." Ruth held my hands with surprising strength for someone her age and said, "Your grandmother prayed for you every night. She would tell me, 'The Lord will find Yusuf. Even if it is in the valley of the shadow of death, he will find him.'" My eyes filled with tears. I knelt right there before that woman, as if kneeling before a buried but living truth. "She knew," I whispered. "She always knew." Ruth hugged me and whispered in my ear, "You are living the fulfillment of the prayers of someone who loved you when no one else saw you." I left that church that night with my chest on fire. It wasn't just a personal experience, it was a calling. I didn't come back just to find Jesus. I came back to be an answer, to be a voice, to be a light. And deep down I knew this journey was just beginning. But now I was no longer walking in the dark. A few days after that encounter with Ruth, something strange began to happen. It was as if my mind was being pulled back to that moment of light. Not in a dream. It was more real than that. I was alone at home in the basement, sitting in the old wooden chair where I had been secretly reading my Bible. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was overcome by a feeling I had already known, warmth, lightness, the same presence I had felt when I was between life and death. And there, in the most absolute silence, I heard the voice again, the same one who had called me by name, the same one who welcomed me with peace. "Yusuf, you chose to come back. But now, what do you want to live for?" It was as if Jesus had been waiting for me there the whole time, not only to save me, but to ask me, "What now?" I remained silent, because I had never stopped to think about it. I had survived. I had been welcomed. But for what? The image of my grandmother, the memory of Ruth, the hug from Brian, the messages from people at church. It all started to connect. Jesus continued, "Many see miracles and remain silent. You saw the truth, and it was not to remain silent." I started to cry. "But I don't know how to speak. I don't know how to preach. I don't even know the Bible by heart," I stammered in a low voice, feeling the old insecurity pulling at me again. But the answer was firm, clear. "You were not called to impress. You were called to tell what you experienced." And in that instant, I saw flashes of the accident. I saw my body among the wreckage. I saw the hands of the paramedics. I heard the voices from the darkness. And stronger than anything, I felt the embrace of the light again. Coming back wasn't luck. It was a mission. That night, I decided to do something symbolic. I went into the bathroom, filled the tub with warm water. I grabbed an old towel and, alone with tears in my eyes, I dove in. It was my baptism, not the official one, but the one that sealed what was already engraved in my soul. When I emerged, the only word I could say was, "Send me." The day after my solitary baptism, I made the decision I had been putting off for weeks, to tell my story openly, not just to the church or to Brian, but to everyone. I prepared a simple video. I used the hidden cell phone that Layla had secretly returned to me. I recorded it sitting in the basement with the Bible on my lap, the dim light behind me, and my heart beating like a war drum. My name is Yusuf Rahman. I was a Muslim. I had a near-death experience. I saw Jesus, and he saved me. That is the truth. Even if it costs everything, I posted and waited. Within 48 hours, the video had spread. Groups from the Islamic community in my city shared it with outrage. Anonymous messages began to arrive, calling me a traitor, crazy, cursed. But there were others, dozens, then hundreds. People who said, "I went through this too. Your courage gave me strength. I saw Jesus too." But the reaction I feared most was yet to come. On Friday night, my father came down to the basement. His eyes were red, his breathing heavy. He tossed my phone on the bed with the video paused, the frozen image of my face declaring my faith in Christ. "Do you want to humiliate us in front of the community?" he said in a choked voice. I stood up slowly, not arrogantly, but with a firmness that I myself had never felt before. "Father, I love you, but I can't deny what I've experienced." He was silent for a second, and then with a coldness that cut deeper than any shout, he murmured, "Then you are no longer my son." Those words didn't just echo in my mind, they exploded inside my chest. The pain was physical, an invisible cut that didn't bleed but burned like fire. My mother appeared on the stairs. She cried silently. Layla tried to hold back her tears too, hiding behind the wall. No one said anything else. I was thrown out that night. No luggage, no goodbye. Just the clothes on my back, my Bible, and the certainty that Jesus was with me. I returned to Grace Chapel, and Brian welcomed me without a second thought. The church gave me shelter, a mattress in a small back room, hot food, and something I had never fully felt before, belonging. There, among simple people, I began to live. I gave my testimony in one service, then in another. Soon, other churches began to invite me. People came to me in tears. Young ex-Muslims, cold Christians rekindling their faith, curious atheists. I had no theological answers, but I had the truth engraved in my heart. I died, and Jesus brought me back. And that, no one could take it away from me. I lost my house, but I found my home. I don't know exactly when it happened, whether it was in the 3rd service or in the 10th video, but at some point, my story stopped being just mine and started being shared by thousands. Invitations started coming in from all sides, churches, podcasts, conferences. My old phone, with its cracked screen and dying battery, could barely keep up with the response. People from Texas, California, North Carolina, pastors, young people, ex-Muslims, everyone wanted to hear from me. Everyone was saying the same thing. "Your story woke me up." I remember the first flight I took. It was to a meeting in Houston. I was nervous. I wore the same outfit I had received as a donation from Grace Chapel. When I walked up on stage at the local church, there were about 300 people there, but it felt like the whole world was watching me. I spoke from the heart. without rehearsals, without filters. I told him everything: the basement, the light, the name of Jesus coming out of my mouth while still intubated, my father's rejection, the peace I found, and at the end, when I paused, silence, a silence that screamed, until someone stood up, then another, then everyone, standing, with tears in their eyes, people praying, hugging strangers, as if heaven had touched that place for a few seconds. That night, a young woman named Layla, the daughter of Lebanese immigrants, came to me trembling. She showed me a scar on her arm and said, "I tried to take my own life 3 weeks ago. I saw your video yesterday. It was like God pulled me back. Thank you for not keeping quiet." I hugged that girl like she was my sister. And there I understood it wasn't about me, it never was. It was about a God who used my pain, my death, my exclusion to reach hearts that were also in invisible basements out there. Over the next few months, I recorded more videos. I wrote articles. I gave interviews. Some Muslims attacked me publicly. Others reached out to me in secret. I cried with each of them because I knew that fear, that loneliness. But among everything I experienced in this new time, there was a moment that will stay with me forever. At a conference in Phoenix, an elderly lady approached me after I preached. She handed me a crumpled piece of paper with a handwritten number on it. "It's your mother's," she said. "She asked me to give it to you if I found you." I ran to the hotel. I called. The voice on the other end answered with a whisper, "Yusuf?" My heart almost stopped. "Mother," she cried. A lot. For long seconds she said nothing. And then, with a trembling voice, he spoke. "I don't understand everything, son, but I saw the peace in your eyes. And I just want to say that I love you." At that moment, I knew that Jesus' love was reaching where my words could not. Today I walk through places I never dreamed of entering before. Crowded churches, universities, prisons, streets, parks, restaurants. Wherever there is someone with an open heart, there I am. I am not a pastor. I am not a theologian. I am just a man who died and came back with a mission. Jesus didn't save me because I deserved it. He saved me because he loved me. And this love doesn't require a spiritual pedigree or a clean record. He finds us where no one else can, even in a basement, even among the wreckage, even in complete darkness. Yes, I lost everything: my house, my family, my culture, my name in certain circles. But I found what many spend their entire lives searching for: purpose. Because now every word that comes out of my mouth carries eternal weight. Every tear that falls from those who hear me is a reminder that the truth sets you free, even if it costs everything. And do you know what's most amazing? I discovered that I am not alone. In every city I visit, I meet someone like me. Someone who lived the dilemma of doubt. Someone who thought God was too far away. Someone who never felt worthy until he met Jesus. People who were not born into an evangelical family, but who were found on the edge of the abyss. People who survived overdoses, abuse, temptations. People who were in the dark and saw the light. And that's why I keep going. Not to be famous, not to get likes, but because every time someone hears my story and says, "It was like God spoke to me," I remember why I came back. Today, my mother talks to me every Sunday. She still doesn't understand everything, but she asks about Jesus with curiosity. Layla was baptized 2 months ago, and even from a distance I feel that my Father is listening. He hasn't spoken to me yet, but I heard he's been watching my videos in secret, and I pray every day that the same light that found me finds him too. If you've made it this far, know one thing: you are also being called. Maybe not by words, maybe not by a supernatural experience, but if your heart is beating right now, if something inside you moved during this story, don't ignore it. God still speaks, God still saves, God still transforms, and maybe he brought you here at this very moment to say, "I see you, I love you, and you can come back too," because no one is too far away, not even those who died. If you've made it this far, it's because something touched your heart. So don't leave without subscribing to the channel. It helps me continue sharing stories that change lives. Comment below, "The light has reached me," so I know you watched it all the way through and were impacted. Leave a like if this story spoke to you. And now watch the next video that appears on the screen. It might be exactly what you need to hear today.